Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 16, 2025 Form-Based Code Area Working Group meeting. My name is Daniel Weir. I am the chair of the working group. We are holding the virtual public meeting tonight, and all participants are joining remotely. To orient everyone to the environment and cover a few specifics about how the meeting will be run, tonight's meeting is available to join via the Form-Based Code Area Working Group webpage, the county events calendar, and at the top of the agenda. Additionally, there's a dial-in option for those who wish to use it. I don't see anyone on a phone number right now. More on that if that happens. If anyone loses internet connectivity during the meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your video turned off and microphone muted until you're called upon. Please turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. These tools are located as icons on your toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar, try tapping or clicking on the center of your screen. It will pop up. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located in your command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. And the meeting thread is active for participants who need technical assistance and should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally and for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. For AWG members, if you wish to be recognized to speak on an item, I ask that you please turn your video feed on, leaving your microphone muted and raising your hand using the raise hands function in Teams. I'll use video feeds as well as the hand function as an indication of who would like to speak and in what order people have indicated that they wish to speak. Once you've been recognized, you may unmute. Once you've completed speaking, please turn your video feed back off. Checking again on phones. I still don't see any phone numbers. Ms. Sontag and I will keep an eye on that as the meeting progresses. I don't see any public speakers this evening. If we do get any public speakers, we will, Ms. Sontag and I will provide further information on the procedures and protocols for public comment. Lastly, this is a public forum. As a reminder, tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. And please remember that all information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. I'm going to go to Ms. Sontag for our agenda items.
Thank you, Commissioner Weir. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, and just want to make sure everybody can see this before I dive in.
Yes, yes.
All right, great. Thank you. So again, Olivia Sontag with the Arlington County Planning Division. So here this evening to present some of the proposed amendments to the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, which will enable the creation and use of a phased development use permit tool to track commitments across the 60-acre Barcroft Apartments property. So the presentation outline for this evening, I'll do a quick refresher on all the commitments made in the Master Financing Development Plan, then cover the purpose of the phased development use permit, and lastly, we'll look at the areas of change that are proposed in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. So quick refresher here, Barcroft Apartments is a 60-acre property with over 50 residential buildings and 1,335 units. It's bounded generally by Columbia Pike to the north, George Mason Drive to the east, and 4 Mile Run to the west. The property also includes the commercial site that's just east of George Mason Drive, so the Penske and 7-Eleven truck rental site, and the site just in the northwest commercial corner, the Goodwill site. So both of those are now within the boundaries of the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code after amendments that the county board adopted in February. So I think most everybody's familiar on this call, but for anyone who's not, we'll start with this brief background again on the property, the acquisition, and some of the commitments that have been made. So when it was listed for sale in fall of 2021, it risked the displacement of residents. With loans from Arlington County and Amazon, the Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners team acquired the property, preserving the affordability of 1,335 units for 99 years, averaging up to 60% area median income. And then as a result, no residents were displaced, and staff and the Gyre Lynch team have been working to memorialize these commitments and an updated vision for the property over the past couple of years. So most of these commitments have been outlined in the Master Financing Development Plan, which the County Board approved back in July of 2024. It's a document produced by Jar Lynch Real Estate Development Team, which includes the Affordable Housing Financing Plan, the Site Redevelopment Plan, and a phasing plan. So some of the commitments, such as the revised conservation areas, the multimodal network, locations of public parks and natural areas, were all memorialized in amendments to the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code in February of 2025. However, there are some additional commitments, such as tree canopy coverage, and the phasing plan, which are not codified in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, and those will need to be monitored separately, which is why we're here to talk about this phased development use permit. So this brings us back to the long-term vision for Barcroft. The commitment to preserving the 1,335 CAFs remains, where some units will be preserved in the existing buildings, which are being renovated, and some will be delivered in new construction. And then remaining portions of the property in the northeast and northwest commercial or corners may see some market rate development, as you can see in this example in the rendering, these kind of yellow buildings here. That's where a lot of the, or all of the redevelopment could occur on the site. So to bring us to some of our nearer term use permits, to date, we've had 4 renovation use permits that have been approved by the county board. We're currently reviewing the 5th and 6th use permits, which are scheduled to come to the AWG for review in May and to the county board in June. The 7th and final renovation use permit will be reviewed in the fall. And then we're anticipating approximately 960 of the 1,335 CAFs to be preserved in those renovated units. And then the remaining 375 CAFs will be provided in new construction in approximately 3 different buildings. The first new construction use permit was approved by the county board in February and includes 110 CAFs. A second new construction use permit is currently under review. It's located at 4110 Columbia Pike. It's at the southeast corner of Columbia Pike and George Mason. That's the Penske truck rental and 7-Eleven buildings. So that proposal includes 260 market rate units, and it's anticipated to be reviewed by the AWG also in May and considered by the county board in July. So here you can see some of the remaining sites that are eligible for redevelopment as part of the revisions that we did to the regulating plan, which the board adopted in February. So we anticipate a total of about 20 use permits across the entire property, 7 of which are going to be renovations. The remaining 12 or 13 are going to be new construction. So while the renovations are anticipated to be completed within the next couple of years, the timing and sequencing of the new construction is largely going to be dependent on the timing of resident relocation on site, tax credits, and different market conditions. So all to say that this is going to be a long-term plan with many different use permits and elements to track as renovations and redevelopment are completed across the site. So that brings us to our phase development use permit. So to help monitor these commitments across about 20 different use permits, we're proposing this phase development use permit tool, which will help to track and implement elements which are not codified in the neighborhoods form-based code, such as tree canopy, accessible units, and biophilic pathways. But it's also going to allow the use permits to share and collectively deliver some of these commitments. So the 5 different categories which we're planning to track include those tree canopy targets, which are outlined in the Master Financing Development Plan, accessible unit commitments in the Master Financing Development Plan, and as they're required by the building code, the overall parking supply, particularly for the renovated areas, affordable housing, and then the biophilic pathways. So we'll also have a phasing plan as part of this tool that'll be developed to help track items like the biophilic pathways and other streetscape improvements. So this will help indicate which improvements will be tied to which redevelopment and renovation areas, but it's not necessarily going to detail the sequencing or the timing of delivery of those elements. So the PDUP will include condition language, data tables and maps to track the various categories, a phasing plan and design guidelines for the pedestrian pathways. But unlike a phase development site plan or a PDSP, which some of you may be familiar with, the PDUP is not going to include things like density and use allocations. These are already prescribed in the neighborhood's form-based code, and the code uses form rather than density to track those items. It's also not going to include a traditional phasing plan with an order of phases to be delivered. And then the neighborhood's form-based code also already includes architectural design guidelines, so these aren't necessary to include in the PDUP either. So these next few slides are going to provide a little more detail on the commitments in each of the categories that we'll be tracking across the 60-acre site. So this first slide summarizes all of the various tree canopy commitments across redevelopment, the renovation areas, parks, and some of the preserved natural areas. So the renovation and redevelopment use permits reviewed so far have demonstrated the ability to meet these targets through conservation of existing trees and planting new trees. And the applicant's going to do their best to continue to meet these targets in each area. However, where they can create excess tree canopy in some locations, this tool will allow them to use that to meet shortfalls in other areas. And we'll use the PDUP tool to track all of these across each of the use permits. So the second item are tracking accessible units across the site. So per the building code, Barcroft Apartments is required to provide 2% of the total units as accessible units. As you've probably seen as we've reviewed some of these renovation use permits, due to topography, some of the existing building entrances and split levels, but also ensuring that each unit has proximate access to parking and all of the common areas that are created. It has been a challenge to provide accessible units in all of the phases or each of the buildings. So they're providing them where possible, and we'll be tracking this across all of the renovated and redeveloped areas to make sure that any shortfall that we find in renovation areas is going to be made up in new construction. The developer also made a commitment in the master financing development plan to provide 10% of units in the committed affordable unit new construction buildings as accessible units. So this will help make up for any shortfall in the renovations. And you can see in this table on the right how that's already assisting with some of the shortfalls in renovations. I believe in total, as we've been tracking the renovation use permits, they're only going to be short by 1 unit in the renovation areas, which is great. They've worked really hard to find creative ways to add accessible units. But again, that new construction, a committed affordable units building will help to make up the gap of that 1 unit. So the third item is tracking the overall parking. Primarily, we're looking at the renovated buildings with this phase development use permit, ensuring that approximately 1 space per unit is preserved for those renovated areas. The parking ratios for redevelopment are already prescribed in the neighborhood's form-based code. So those will remain the same for CAF new construction. They're allowed to have that 0.825 spaces per unit, market rate at 1.125 spaces per unit, and then the requirement for retail spaces. And the fourth item, and this is a big one, is affordable housing. So consistent with their commitment, they're going to provide 1,335 CAFs for the 99 years, averaging that 60% AMI. Which will be provided within the renovated buildings and those about 3 new construction projects that'll be 100% affordable. So all other market rate development across the site is going to be able to rely on these CAFs to meet their minimum on-site CAF requirements in the neighborhood's form-based code. And this table is another example of how this requirement will be monitored, with many of the CAFs already having been formalized through the renovation use permit process. Delivery of additional CAFs with the new construction project that was approved in February. And then the proposed market rate new construction project, which is currently under review, which requires approximately 78 CAFs. Those will be subtracted from the site-wide bank that we'll be tracking for this. So the last item we'll be tracking are the biophilic pedestrian pathways. Those are providing some of those north-south and east-west connections through the site. These are largely going to be tracked through the proposed phasing plan. There's going to be some renovation areas and some redevelopment areas that are going to be responsible for these connections. And that'll include establishing pathways, uh, including lighting along the pathways, planting benches, and any of the other adjacent streetscape improvements that have been called for in the cross sections that were developed and adopted by the board in February. And then the PDUP will also include a set of design guidelines for these pathways. But a little bit closer look at the proposed site-wide phasing plan. So the renovation areas will primarily be responsible for delivering some of those natural preserve areas and many of these biophilic pathways. And then some will also be improving some surface parking areas. But here on the right, you can see the general boundaries of these use permits and the improvements that are included within those boundaries. And then for the new construction areas, as is typical, each of the use permits is going to be responsible for providing the streetscape improvements along the frontages. There may be some flexibility in the deliver of certain streetscape improvements if it's necessary, and we'll continue to evaluate that with the applicant in the coming months. It'll also identify how each of the 3 public parks will be associated with a new development proposal. For example, the application that's under review right now at the Penske and 7-Eleven site, that will include delivery of the mini park on the corner there. And then we will have some additional unique phasing details for the biophilic network, those bike facilities and roadway improvements, particularly along 12th Road, which will be important to deliver all at one time and not in piecemeal chunks. And then there will be the need to reconfigure some of the surface parking as each of the sites redevelop. So moving on to the actual amendments, and we did post a copy of the proposed track changes that we're proposing to the neighborhood's form-based code. So ultimately, though this phase development use permit tool will track a number of different categories, the need to amend the form-based code is pretty limited to just a couple of different areas. One, to enable the use permits to meet their affordability requirements off-site, as long as they're within this phase development use permit area. And also considering adjustment of delivery of some of these streetscape improvements, especially those that are delivering bike facilities, which again, we'll want to deliver in groups and not piecemeal. And then separately, we're also working on establishing this tool in the administrative regulations and incorporating any other necessary updates. So we can share copies of those updates in the coming months as well. So there are 3 different sections specifically that are being updated to enable this phase development use permit tool. The first area is in the administration section, specifically under the modification section, and happy to answer questions about the changes that are introduced here. The second part, again, is enabling flexibility for delivering some of those sidewalk and streetscape standards. And then the third section is in the affordable housing requirements, again, enabling off-site delivery of committed affordable units as long as they're within this phase development use permit boundary. So here is our upcoming schedule. We're working on finalizing this tool and this application type. Internally, the board has adopted new fees for this application, which were effective as of yesterday. So we'll be working with the applicant in the coming month or so to have them file this phase development use permit with all of the details with each of the categories that we'll be tracking and all of the phasing plans. So we'll likely be bringing this application back to you in June to review. And then for the amendments that are required to the form-based code, we anticipate taking that request to advertise to the board in June and to the county board in July. So when we bring the amendments to the county board, we also plan to bring forward the phase development use permit application from the applicant, as well as the use permit for the 4110 Columbia Pike site, which is the Penske location. And this is going to be the first instance that one of these applications will need to rely on this flexibility. So that completes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions or pull up the amended text if that's helpful.
So I have one question, and then given that we have relatively few people tonight, I think unless anyone disagrees, I'm inclined to just go to just free form conversation. Given given how we've only got 6 people. Ms. Sante, so you talked about how there has to be enabling language in 4.1 to create the PDUP structure. Is it only going to be available within the form-based code, or is it going to be available generally? And if the latter, maybe this is a related question, are there any other parts of Arlington where a PDUP could be used beyond the form-based code?
So right now we're only introducing it in the neighborhoods form-based code, and we're working on developing a definition for it, but it's limited just to large sites. And we've done a study of all of the property ownership across the pike, and this is the only location where it would currently apply as we're defining the phase development use permit tool.
Okay, and there's no other part of the county that it could apply, given. Are there any parts of the Powell County that it could apply to but for the fact that it's only being written to apply to the form-based code area?
It will only apply to properties within the boundaries of the form-based code area. So unless there were, other changes to the zoning ordinance outside of it, it's still going to be limited to those areas. And again, there aren't any other properties right now that we found, would be appropriate to apply for this or would benefit from this tool. But that could be explored more in the future if we found that was applicable. Yeah.
All right, Linda, you've got your hand up, and then after that, I'm just going to encourage people to chime in since it's the 6 of us.
Thank you. Olivia, can you go to slide 13, the tree canopy targets?
Sure.
The statement on site, along streets, and on structures. I guess I've never really thought about the tree canopy on top of structures. So is this new, and how is this new to the county? I guess I hadn't really thought this through before I'm just curious about how you count tree canopies on top of structures. So I'm interested in understanding a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so we see this sometimes on new construction applications when they provide their open contiguous lot area on top of the first story. And I know at least under the Chesapeake Bay ordinance requirements, they do allow, counting tree canopy on structure. So typically we're going to just see that no higher than that, than above that first story. But
okay, yeah, I was trying to picture on top of a 10-story building or something like that, but that's not the intent.
Yeah,
But
typically
the first story,
it's just those
sure.
courtyards.
Yeah, the Oklo. Got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I guess that's all I've got at this point. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Olivia, you don't have a timeline slide here, do you?
This last one was,
This upcoming milestones. Okay.
yeah, just some upcoming. We don't have specific dates yet, but we can pass those along. And it looks like Kathy has her hand up.
I think I do. I
Please,
hope I do.
Kathy.
Sorry, I
Yep.
sometimes have trouble with the buttons here. Is it okay if I jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I just on slide, I think it's 14, regarding the accessible units. This has been a topic of some discussion at various org meetings, and really appreciate that they're making a commitment to go above and beyond the building code, which was 2% of total units as accessible. But it looks as though they're making a commitment to providing 10% of units in CAF new construction buildings as accessible units. And I was just curious if there's thought given at this stage to how that is memorialized in these documents moving forward. Just curious. Thanks.
Sure. So we plan to track these through, a series of, tables. In each of the renovation use permits themselves, the condition language does memorialize each of those accessible unit counts. So they will be, beholden to those under the conditions of approval. We'll also have condition language as part of the phase development use permit that'll, again, help to reinforce that building code requirement. We'll have to be a little bit careful because building codes change. But as of right now, with each use permit, we're holding them to that 2% requirement. And again, it's as the new construction projects come online, it'll help to make up some of that deficit. So we'll be tracking them through a couple different ways, but without the neighborhoods form-based code, codifying these accessible units, and while the master financing development plan is great, we do need a tool that has some additional teeth, and that's why we're proposing this phase development use permit tool to make sure that across the site, these commitments are being upheld.
Yes, you just to clarify, you just referenced 2%, which is in the building code, but it sounds as though they're wanting to go above and beyond that to be 10%, it looked like on the slide. So
yes, 10% in the new construction, 100% affordable buildings. And that commitment was made in the master financing development plan. So because they made that commitment in the master financing development plan, we're kind of memorializing that commitment through the phase development use permit. So it'll now exist in condition language. And again, just hold them to that commitment.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just trying to track all the different. I realize this is sort of a little bit sui generis. So yeah, thank you for helping to differentiate the various places where this may or may not appear. Thank you.
Yes.
So is it, if I may, is it that the PDUP would set a 10% commitment, or that the PDUP would set the commitment at 2%, or whatever is negotiated through a separate agreement, whichever is greater?
So the 2% requirement, just being a building code requirement, is something that typically we would expect that 2% requirement to be met within each building or within each phase of within each use permit phase. So the reason we're introducing this into the phase development use permit is to allow them that flexibility to, maybe provide, for example, they're providing in this renovation use permit 6, 5 accessible units because the topography just allows for that. So it's giving them that flexibility to meet that building code requirement across the site. But separately, they made this 10%. They made this, voluntary commitment to providing 10% of units in the new construction committed affordable buildings as accessible. So because of that commitment, we're also tracking that separately. The 2% can borrow from that voluntary commitment that they made. So it does help to supplement. But it's just another commitment that we're making sure that we're tracking across all of the developments that apply.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. Ed, John, any questions?
This is John. I don't have any questions.
I do have one question. I don't know if it's appropriate right now, but I remember last year at about this time, we were looking at, there was the old shop that had been in one of the buildings that seemed like it might be a good place to be able to put in accessible units. But at that time, for I guess to keep the project rolling, we did not put it into the project formally. Is now a time that we can talk about that to get that shop included as an accessible unit?
I'm not recalling which project that was.
I couldn't tell you what building it is, but it's where the shop was located, and it has an at-grade entrance, and there was like 3 parking spaces right outside the door. And at the time, because of the financing that was, as it was set up for the first phase, I think, it was said that we'd have to deal with this at a later time. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, I apologize. I don't recall which area that was in. I know that the accessible units that are proposed in this table right now are what the applicant is planning to deliver. So I know that they've studied and restudied the site to try to get to this 2% number across the renovated areas. And this is the best that they could provide, again, with the challenges of also providing proximate parking and pathways to all of the common areas.
Yeah, well, that's why I bring it up, because you did mention there's the factors of topography and the entrances and all that, but we do know that that shop was right at an at-grade entrance and had parking right outside the door.
And when you're saying shop,
There was like a maintenance shop.
a maintenance area,
Yeah, it was a maintenance shop.
that may have
Was it
been
a
in.
maintenance area or was it one of the laundry facilities and storage?
To be honest, I don't know well, I thought it was a maintenance shop. It could have been laundry, but I thought it was a maintenance shop.
I think I'm recalling what you're talking about now. I believe that was with this 4th renovation use permit. And I believe at the time when this item came to the AWG, they were still studying if they could get an accessible unit in that location. And they were able to deliver 4 accessible units within those 2 buildings. So I think at that point, and I can go back and confirm, but I think they were able to convert some of those existing areas to maintenance areas. The issue at the time was they weren't allowed to create any new net new units. There was a limitation in the code at the time that they couldn't do that. So they creatively instead just created some larger family-sized units in that property. So
Right.
kept the net unit total the same, but were able to deliver larger family-sized units and use that space on the ground floor that was suitable for accessible units to create some accessible units.
Okay, great.
So
the
yes,
focus is
problem solved.
okay, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up because I know last year at about this time we were stuck. We couldn't make any changes at that point.
Yeah, that was a good memory.
I'll bring down my hand. I don't know how to, let's see. Try and do that. Okay.
Unless anyone has anything else, I think that that's going to be it for the questions that we have for you, Olivia. Uh, Anything else that you have for us?
No updates right now. I think, as you heard in the presentation, May is going to be a busy month. We anticipate, barring any changes, to schedule, that we'll be bringing 2 renovation use permits to you. We'll kind of try to combine those into one large presentation from staff and the applicant during the first hour. And then during the second hour of the meeting, we'll review the 4110 Columbia Pike, the Penske site application, which is anticipated to go to the board in July. So I'll keep you updated if there are any changes to that schedule. But we do anticipate having a lengthy meeting in May. We'll likely meet again in June to review this phase development use permit application that's being filed. And then we'll see about July. Maybe we'll give you guys a break in July.
I'm really excited, especially about the Penske site. So yeah, do you know, is the Penske site submission, is that viewable on Permit Arlington?
Yes, it's available to the public. I did create the project webpage, so I can drop a link in the chat, so you're able to have access to that.
Great.
And there you should be able to access all of the permit drawings and any of the upcoming meeting schedules that we have.
Great, thank you. And Linda, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, just thought of this. Have they found any environmental remediation situations, since we're now going to be dealing with that southeast corner of the Pike and George Mason? That has been a commercial area for many, many decades. And I'm just curious, has anybody needed to check and see if there are any environmental remediation situations below ground or in that area, since it has had a commercial. At least there wasn't a gas station there that I'm aware of that I can ever remember. It was a restaurant and the 7-Eleven, but I'm just curious so that they don't have any surprises.
Yeah, it's a great question. We are, in the early stages of review. So it's certainly something we'll be discussing with the applicant. But we haven't had any red flags so far, such as a gas station having been present there. But thanks for raising it. It'll certainly be part of the review.
Yep, we don't need any nasty surprises.
Yeah.
They have enough challenges as it is. I'm so impressed with this whole project. It's just astonishing how you and everybody else are trying to keep track of all of this. It's mind blowing.
Well, I'm glad we're impressing you. Sometimes it feels a little hectic.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I look forward to seeing these plans and continuing some of our conversations next month. We'll be adjourned then.
Thanks,
Have a good evening,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, take care. Good night.